Hey YouTube, what's up? Mike the Manic Geek here, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Cougar 500K gaming keyboard. This comes in presently at around $90 US, and while it is a membrane keyboard, it boasts a host of features that might be able to justify the price point. So without further ado, let's dive in and see what this thing has to offer. So we'll start off with ergonomics, basic layout, and the visual appeal of the keyboard here. We have this nice gold-colored Cougar label across the top, which, while it is kind of blingy and up front, it's very tastefully done. Black and gold has a really elegant look to it, and honestly it makes me wish that they had stuck to this design motif a little bit more closely throughout the rest of the keyboard. You do have a suite of profile switches up here, as well as a macro recorder. You have LED control, Windows shut off, and the rest of your obligatory media keys, as well as having some other macro keys along the side of the keyboard here to program for different functions as you desire. Now, one of the quirky things about this keyboard is the 6th macro button. You can see down here that it's part of the spacebar, and it splits the spacebar in two as a result of its function. The point of this is to give you an extra macro key that's close to your thumb on the keyboard while you're playing without completely gimping spacebar functionality. Where it gets weird is typing, but that's actually a relatively easy fix, as we'll discuss later on. It's just something that you may have to get used to. Now, coming out of the rear of the keyboard, we also see this lovely braided cable, which is extremely thick. Now, the reason for that is because this keyboard offers a USB pass-through in the form of a single USB port on the right-hand side of the keyboard near the rear. I might have liked to see one on both sides of the keyboard, but that's just going to add extra cost. Not everyone uses even one USB pass-through, but it is nice to see it included here, and it does work extremely well. Now, included with the 500K is this removable wrist rest that you get with it. It's nothing to write home about, as far as build quality and durability is concerned. It's about what you would expect from a plastic wrist rest. Just provided that you're not going Hulk smash on this, this should probably be fine for most every user out there. But it is nice to see that it is removable, and they also give you this extra left palm bolster, which just sort of magnetizes onto the wrist rest and provides you with a little bit of added elevation for when you're gaming. Now, they specifically mention first-person shooter titles. However, even playing games like League of Legends or Diablo 3, I found that this made my wrist extremely comfortable while gaming, to the point that my hand has never felt so relaxed gaming before. And frankly, this is a kind of feature that I'd like to see a lot more often on any sort of enthusiast or gaming-oriented keyboard. Now, the surface of the add-on palm rest is rubberized. It does have a decent feel to it. It's maybe a little too industrial feeling, maybe for some. I don't mind it, but I did notice that my palm got a little bit sweatier during gameplay. Your mileage may vary. I have naturally sweaty palms to begin with when I game, so take that with a grain of salt. Now, fit and finish once the palm rest is installed is really good. There's just a little bit of bowing in the center, which shouldn't really impact much of anything, and again, provided that you're not slamming down on the keyboard and rage quitting out on it, then you should be fine. I wouldn't really worry about that too much here. Now, you do get some rubber feet on the bottom of the keyboard. Nothing super special to write home about, but they do a good job of keeping everything in place. Those same rubber stops are also on the bottom of the wrist rest, so if you add that in place, you're not going to have just that bit of extra mass that makes it a little easier to slide the keyboard around. Now, on the feet for the back of the keyboard, you have a wraparound rubber foot, which means that no matter the orientation for this, you're still going to have that rubber contact on the table, which is a really awesome design cue from Cougar. Now, of course, myself not being one to be afraid of voiding my warranty, I did go ahead and disassemble this keyboard a little bit for you guys. Now, the disclaimer here, as always, disassembling your products in most instances is going to void your warranty. So if you go ahead and do this yourself, approach it with caution and know that if something goes wrong, it's your own fault and you're kind of SOL there. But I found that as a membrane keyboard, nothing was really overly surprising here. There's a million thousand different screws holding this thing together, and that's pretty typical for this style of keyboard because you got to keep those membranes fixed firmly in place in order for the domes to make contact with them correctly. Otherwise, you're not going to get accurate keystrokes. Now, what I did find, however, was a really interesting implementation for the different mode settings for the keyboard. Rather than having an overly complicated controller for it, they have 3 individual membranes underneath the keyboard, and activating different mode switches up here does influence which membrane is getting activated when you hit a key. It's a really clever implementation, and it really doesn't add much of anything in terms of production costs or excessive weight to the keyboard, because membranes cost like nothing to make, and yeah, they weigh nothing as well. So again, really awesome job with the implementation here. Now, as far as overall durability is concerned, I see no cause for real concern with this keyboard. You do get some typical flex out of it, but again, it's typical. It's not anything you wouldn't expect from a keyboard, and if you're having to really wrestle around with this, I think you might need to reassess what it is you're supposed to be doing with the keyboard in the first place. Now, a couple of quick features that I want to point out before we get into the LEDs and software on this is you do actually have a kind of neat rapid fire mode that you can activate with this keyboard. Now, it gives you base speeds as well as double, quadruple, and octuple speed presses. It's very noticeable in a game. It's definitely not anything that would be tournament legal, but it is a fun little thing to play around with if you're saying one of those games where there's like a button mashing component to it, similar to like a Mario Party style game. Now, the other thing that you have here is the option to pick between 6-key and N-key rollover. Now, I didn't really mess around with this a whole lot because I found even during playing something like Diablo 3 or League of Legends, where I'm mashing a lot of buttons at one time trying to get things done, I never once experienced issues with any of my key presses not getting registered on this keyboard. So to wrap things up with this review, I wanted to touch on the LEDs for this. Now, unfortunately, they're not RGB, they are strictly orange. Which, as a design decision, I kind of get it, because that's the Cougar colors, like black and orange. I get that, it's brand identity. But the rest of the keyboard is this sleek black and gold affair with just a tiny bit of gray coming out for the macro buttons there. If you would have made the backlighting on this white, or even like a pale yellow, like a gold color, to match the gold trim on this, that would have been over the top for this keyboard. Cougar, please reconsider the orange LEDs on future versions of this keyboard and let us have something different. But it's a minor gripe, because the LED implementation on this is relatively clean. Lighting is more or less even on all of the buttons across the keyboard, and you can even control the intensity of the lighting as well as a breathing effect with the included LED button on the back here. Now, the one thing that I don't like about it is that it only lets you control the LEDs for the main buttons on the keyboard. So all of your optional keys up here, as well as the rapid fire indicator, are always lit, which, yeah, that I get it. There need to be indicators there to let you know the state of things on the keyboard. But stuff like your pause, play, stop, fast forward buttons and your macro buttons and mode buttons up here, does that really need to be illuminated at all times? I personally would have liked to seen those turn off as well. But again, your mileage may vary. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about here is the Cougar UI AX gaming software that they use for this. Now, this software allows you to go in and customize everything for all of your Cougar peripherals that they're allowed to customize on it. In the case of this keyboard, you get the repeat rate acceleration that you can test. They even give you a space here to let you test that out. Polling rate, the style of N-key rollover that you're using, the delay on the repeats. You can set up your mode syncs for the different mode switches independently. You can independently program each of the different modes, save and load different profiles for this. They even give you the option to control your lighting independent of the switch in a way. So basically, depending on the mode you get, you can turn on or off the different steps of lighting. And in my case, I just have it to on or off at all times, and that's all it will ever cycle through. Now, a nice redundancy that they add in here for those that are a little forgetful when it comes to remembering things like this is they allow you to disable the Windows key as a product of the software here. So you don't even have to have this Windows key on or off in order to deactivate that key. So that's just one less LED that I have lit, and I actually kind of like that here. Now, the other thing that you get to do, as I mentioned earlier, when talking about the space bar, is you get to set up independent macros on here and different key bindings. Now, this applies to essentially every key on the keyboard as far as I can tell. I will add some annotations in here down at the bottom of the video if I discover that anything else is the case. But what's nice is that you can actually set your G6 macro here to the spacebar. So if you're a typical typist like myself and you would have preferred a full-length spacebar, boom, you now have a solution to the problem. And actually, what's really nice about that is regardless of whether you tend to space with your left or right thumb, the fact that you have physically smaller space bars here means that each individual space bar is a little lighter than a normal space bar. Not to the point that you're going to get really inaccurate and sloppy with it, though. This is it's actually a really clean implementation. I like it rather a lot. Honestly, if I had only one thing to gripe about with this keyboard, it would be the switches. Now, take all of this with a grain of salt because that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a personal preference of mine, and as a typist, I prefer a switch that's just a little lighter to actuate than what these membranes are. But that being said, I've transitioned over to this as being my daily driver keyboard. Even Kale Brown switches aren't matching up to the comfort and quiet level that these membrane switches have. Now, that being said, I would liken this to something like what Ford did with the Mustang up until it finally introduced an independent rear suspension in the car, for those of you gearheads out there. It basically took really old technology and made it as technologically advanced as they could possibly make it, making it as bleeding edge as it will ever be. And that's essentially what I'm getting out of these membrane switches here. These are probably the best membrane switches that I've used in a long time. And for the longest time, I was stuck on membrane keyboards. And honestly, using this now, I kind of get why. In my use of mechanical switches, yes, I do enjoy them, but there are very few implementations that I'm finding actually work well for me, and I'm finding even more so now that there are switches that aren't even present in keyboards on the market that would work for me. So this, combined with all of the different features here, the responsive, lightweight driver software that they use for this, this is about as close to an ideal keyboard for me as I could possibly get. And that's even considering the presence of the numpad here. I can get away with that because of the USB pass-through allowing me to run my mouse through the keyboard, which is really nice ergonomically for me because that means that the disconnect between my keyboard and mouse is less so, and my cable isn't snagging on the edges of my desk like it used to, the way I had to run it behind everything before. So all in all, great job on this keyboard, Cougar. And Cougar does offer mechanical options for their other keyboard lineups as well, if this doesn't quite cut the mustard for you. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. What's been your recent experience with membrane keyboards? And did you expect me to have such a positive outlook on something like the Cougar 500K here? Again, let me know down in the comments below. Do that thumbs up, thumbs down, share, and subscribe thing like you guys do, how you do. And like always, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take it easy, YouTube.